was the United States F-15 to turn a secret jungle drug lab into ashes. Hidden deep in the Mexican jungle, the billion-dollar Cartel lab was protected by thick trees and armed guards. Daily, they made millions from drugs that were sending Americans to their early graves. The Cartel thought it was untouchable until the sky lit up. Now Mexico is furious. How did the United States find it? And could this strike spark a dangerous international showdown? Join us as we find out how the United States completely wiped off a drug cartel lab. The Pentagon war room buzzed with tension as military planners faced their biggest decision. Two aircraft sat on the digital display screen. The F-22 Raptor, America's invisible ghost that could slip past any radar. The F-15, a flying arsenal that carried enough firepower to level a city block. The target was a heavily defended cartel lab deep in the Mexican jungle. Only one plane would get the mission. The choice seemed obvious. Send the stealth fighter, let it sneak through enemy airspace undetected, and strike without warning. But the Pentagon's top minds saw a different picture. This mission needed more than invisibility. It needed an overwhelming force. The F-15 carries 15 air-to-air missiles compared to the F-22's 8 internal weapons. More importantly, it can load massive bombs that stealth fighters cannot carry. The Cartel lab was built like a fortress. Thick concrete walls, underground bunkers. Multiple buildings are spread across acres of jungle. Destroying this target required serious firepower, not surgical precision. Stealth fighters hide their weapons inside internal bays to stay invisible to radar. This design limits what they can carry. The biggest bombs simply will not fit. The F-15 mounts its weapons on external racks. It can carry the heaviest penetrating bombs in America's arsenal. Weapons designed to punch through reinforced concrete and collapse underground facilities. The Eagle II brings another crucial advantage. Its advanced electronic warfare systems create what military experts call virtual stealth. Instead of hiding from enemy radar, it blinds and confuses those same systems. Powerful jammers disrupt communications. Decoy signals make the aircraft appear in multiple locations at once. Defensive systems automatically detect and counter incoming missiles. This electronic shield proves more valuable than traditional stealth in certain missions. Stealth fighters become visible once they open their weapon bays to attack. The F-15 never tries to hide. It overwhelms enemy defenses with electronic warfare while delivering devastating firepower. The aircraft's twin engines generate 58,000 pounds of thrust. This massive power lets it carry maximum weapons loads while maintaining high speed and maneuverability. A fully loaded F-15 can still outrun most enemy fighters. The F-22, while faster when empty, loses performance when carrying heavy weapons internally. Range played the final deciding factor. The jungle lab sat hundreds of miles from the nearest American airbase. The mission required flying deep into hostile territory, striking multiple targets, and returning safely. The F-15's large fuel capacity and efficient engines provided the endurance needed for extended combat operations. Pentagon planners also considered the psychological impact. The cartel needed to see overwhelming American firepower. A stealth attack might go unnoticed until too late. The F-15's massive weapons load would leave no doubt about America's military superiority. The smoking crater would send a clear message to every cartel leader watching. The decision was final. Raw firepower, electronic warfare capability, and extended range made the F-15 the perfect weapon for this mission. Sometimes winning requires being seen, not staying hidden. The Eagle II would deliver America's message with devastating clarity. But choosing the perfect weapon meant nothing without finding the target first. How do you hunt ghosts hiding in Mexico's vast jungle? The U-2 Dragon Lady lifted off from Beale Air Force Base at 4 in the morning. Its single engine whispered through the darkness as the spy plane climbed towards 70,000 feet. Below, most of America still slept. Above, the pilot began the most important reconnaissance mission in the drug war's history. This aircraft was built to photograph Soviet nuclear missiles during the Cold War. Now it hunted a different kind of weapon. Somewhere in the mountains of Sinaloa, a cartel lab was cooking enough fentanyl to kill 10 million Americans. The facility had operated for 3 years without detection. Traditional law enforcement had failed to find it. The military needed eyes that could see through lies. The U-2 never crossed into Mexican airspace. International law prevented that. But from 13 miles high, its cameras could read license plates on trucks moving through cartel territory. Advanced sensors captured every radio signal, every cell phone call, every electronic whisper from the criminal empire below. The spy plane collected data that would have taken ground agents years to gather. Satellites joined the hunt from even higher altitudes. Military reconnaissance birds repositioned over central Mexico, their orbits carefully planned to avoid detection. These electronic guardians watched the same patches of jungle every few hours. Computer programs analyzed thousands of images, looking for changes that human eyes might miss. The breakthrough came from heat signatures. Deep in the forest canopy, something was generating massive amounts of thermal energy. Infrared sensors detected the glow of industrial equipment hidden beneath trees. Chemical processing requires high temperatures. The lab's cooking operations created a heat footprint visible from space. Ground surveillance teams confirmed what satellites suspected. Special operations soldiers, disguised as hikers and researchers, approached the target area from multiple directions. They planted tiny sensors that detected chemical odors carried by the wind. Electronic listening devices picked up the hum of generators and ventilation systems. The cartel had chosen its location carefully. No roads led directly to the facility. Supply trucks stopped miles away, transferring cargo to pack animals for the final journey. Armed guards patrolled a wide perimeter. Motion sensors and cameras protected every approach route. The criminals believed their jungle fortress was invisible. They were wrong. American intelligence agencies had spent 6 months mapping every detail of the operation. Analysts knew the work schedules of lab technicians. They tracked supply deliveries down to individual chemical shipments. Surveillance teams counted security guards and documented their patrol patterns. The final piece came from intercepted communications. Cartel leaders, believing their encrypted phones were secure, discussed production schedules and shipping plans. National Security Agency computers cracked their codes within hours. Every conversation provided more intelligence about the target's exact location and defensive measures. By October, military planners possessed complete blueprints of the hidden facility. They knew which buildings housed the actual cooking equipment. They identified the main chemical storage areas. Most importantly, they had precise GPS coordinates for every structure that needed to be destroyed. The hunt was over. America's invisible eyes had found their target. Now came the hard part, turning intelligence into action. Intelligence had found the target, but destroying it required something no spy plane could provide: presidential permission for war. The Oval Office meeting lasted 3 hours. President Trump sat behind the resolute desk, surrounded by his national security team. Satellite photos of the cartel lab covered the conference table. The defense secretary briefed him on strike options. The CIA director explained the intelligence breakthrough. The attorney general outlined the legal framework needed for military action. The decision was historic. With a single signature, Trump redesignated Mexican cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. The Sinaloa Cartel and Jalisco New Generation Cartel suddenly faced the same legal status as ISIS and Al-Qaeda. This was not paperwork. This was a declaration that would unlock America's full military power against criminal networks operating across the southern border. The terrorist designation created terrifying new realities. Anyone providing material support to these organizations now faces 20 years in federal prison. The definition of support stretched far beyond drug trafficking. Paying protection money, transporting goods through cartel territory, or even family members sending money home could trigger terrorism charges. But Trump needed more than legal authority. He needed Mexico's cooperation. The cartel lab sat on Mexican soil. Any military strike would violate international law without permission from Mexico City. Traditional diplomacy would take months. The fentanyl crisis was killing Americans every day. Trump chose economic warfare instead. The ultimatum arrived on a cold January morning through diplomatic channels. Mexico had until February to crush the cartels or face crushing 25% tariffs on all imports. $400 billion in annual trade hung in the balance. For President Claudia Sheinbaum, the message was crystal clear: deliver results or watch Mexico's economy collapse. Sheinbaum faced an impossible choice in her emergency cabinet meeting. The foreign minister spread satellite images across the conference table, showing American military assets massing along the border. Predator drones had relocated to forward bases in Texas and Arizona. The threat was not just economic, it was existential. Her public response came swiftly and defiantly. Standing at her presidential podium, Sheinbaum rejected any American military intervention on Mexican soil. Her words invoked memories of 1914, when United States naval forces occupied Veracruz for 7 months. Mexican officials privately compared the crisis to that dark chapter when foreign forces violated their sovereignty. But behind closed doors, a different game unfolded. While Sheinbaum publicly denounced American threats, her intelligence chief quietly authorized expanded cooperation with CIA surveillance operations. The contradiction was stark and deliberate. Mexican officials hoped this delicate balance would prevent unilateral strikes while preserving national dignity. Then came the unprecedented gambit. In a single pre-dawn operation that stunned the world, Mexico rounded up 29 imprisoned drug lords from facilities across the country. They loaded them onto planes bound for 8 different American cities. Rafael Caro Quintero, whose 1985 murder of DEA agent Enrique Camarena poisoned relations for decades, finally faced American justice. The mass extradition was desperate diplomacy. Former DEA operations chief called it historic, a clear sign of Mexico's desperation to avoid economic punishment. Typically, Mexico extradited prisoners individually after lengthy legal processes. 29 at once was unprecedented. Trump announced a 30-day suspension of threatened tariffs. The reprieve came with conditions. Mexico agreed to deploy additional troops and intensify operations against fentanyl production. But the crisis had awakened something far more dangerous. Deep in the Mexican jungle, American eyes in the sky had already painted their target with invisible crosshairs. Diplomatic pressure had bought time, but the Cartel lab kept cooking death while Pentagon war planners faced their ultimate test. How? The Pentagon's third-floor conference room had no windows. Under harsh fluorescent lights, military planners spread classified photos across a mahogany table. The Cartel lab appeared as green blobs on thermal imaging. Concrete structures are hidden beneath the jungle canopy. Generator buildings, chemical storage tanks. Guard towers are positioned at strategic points around the perimeter. Air Force Colonel Martinez traced flight paths on the digital map with her finger. 12 F-15s would approach from the north, flying low through mountain valleys to avoid Mexican radar. The route required precise timing. Too early and dawn light would expose the aircraft. Too late, and morning cloud cover might obscure the target. Each pilot had studied the mission for 3 weeks. They memorized satellite images until they could identify every building from memory. Flight simulators recreated the exact terrain, weather conditions, and approach angles. Pilots practiced the attack run dozens of times until muscle memory took over. There would be no second chances once they crossed into Mexican airspace. Weapon selection proved critical. The Pentagon chose GBU-39 small-diameter bombs for their precision and reduced collateral damage. Each F-15 carried 2 bombs, totaling 24 weapons for the strike. These smart bombs used GPS guidance accurate to within 3 feet. Laser designators provided backup targeting if satellite signals failed. The legal team worked around the clock preparing justification documents. Military lawyers cited the same frameworks used against terrorist camps in Pakistan and Yemen. The cartel's terrorist designation provided legal authority. Mexico's failure to eliminate the threat, despite diplomatic agreements, created grounds for self-defense action. International law allowed cross-border strikes against imminent threats to national security. Pentagon planners faced impossible constraints. The strike had to destroy the lab completely while avoiding civilian casualties. Intelligence showed the facility operated with a skeleton crew during pre-dawn hours. Timing the attack for 4 in the morning would minimize loss of life while maximizing destruction of equipment and chemical stockpiles. Weather added another variable. The monsoon season brought heavy cloud cover that could hide the target from laser-guided weapons. Satellite forecasts showed a narrow window of clear skies lasting 2 hours. The strike had to happen within that time frame or wait another week for favorable conditions. Communications security required complete radio silence until weapons release. Pilots would navigate using GPS and pre-programmed waypoints. No voice contact with ground controllers, no data links that enemy signals intelligence could intercept. The strike force would operate as electronic ghosts until the moment bombs began falling. Mission commanders ran through failure scenarios. What if Mexican air defenses detected the formation? F-15 pilots carried air-to-air missiles for self-defense, but had strict orders to avoid engagement unless directly threatened. What if the weather obscured the target? Abort procedures required the formation to return home with weapons unexpended, rather than risk hitting the wrong target. The stakes could not be higher. Success would eliminate a major source of fentanyl killing Americans and demonstrate decisive action against cartel terrorism. Failure could trigger a diplomatic crisis with Mexico, potentially leading to economic retaliation or political upheaval. Civilian casualties would undermine American moral authority and strengthen anti-American sentiment across Latin America. Intelligence updates arrived hourly from surveillance assets monitoring the target. Satellite photos confirmed normal activity patterns. Heat signatures showed the lab operating at full capacity. Guard rotations followed predictable schedules. Everything indicated business as usual at the facility. The final mission briefing occurred at midnight. Pilots received updated weather reports, target coordinates, and rules of engagement. Each aviator signed documents acknowledging the classified nature of the operation. Base security locked down the facility, no phone calls, no internet access, no communication with the outside world until after mission completion. At 0200 hours, ground crews began final preparations. Weapons loaded and armed, fuel tanks topped off, aircraft systems checked and double-checked. The strike force was ready to launch. At 0400 hours, 12 F-15 lifted off into darkness, carrying America's deadliest message. Would the jungle hide their target? The formation climbed through Mexican airspace like silent predators. 12 F-15s maintained radio silence as they approached the Sinaloa Mountains. Their engines whispered death while radar screens across Mexico remained empty. Advanced stealth technology made the heavily armed fighters invisible to ground-based detection systems. Below in the jungle clearing, cartel workers moved between concrete buildings in the pre-dawn darkness. Generator engines hummed steadily, powering the chemical equipment that cooked fentanyl around the clock. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter, their night vision goggles scanning tree lines for ground threats. Nobody looked up. Nobody expected death from the sky. Flight lead checked his targeting display one final time. GPS coordinates matched intelligence reports perfectly. Thermal imaging confirmed heat signatures from active laboratory equipment. The facility glowed like a beacon on infrared sensors. 24 smart bombs hung beneath the strike formation, each weapon programmed with precise impact points. At 30,000 feet above the target, the pilot's voice cut through cockpit silence. Execute, execute, execute. 24 bombs dropped simultaneously from external pylons. No smoke trails marked their descent. No warning sirens announced incoming destruction. The weapons simply vanished into jungle darkness, guided by satellite signals toward their program coordinates. The first explosion shattered the chemical storage building. Industrial tanks containing thousands of gallons of precursor chemicals erupted in orange flames that lit the forest canopy like daylight. Secondary blasts followed as stored materials ignited, sending toxic smoke billowing through the trees. The main laboratory building disintegrated under direct impact from 6 bombs. Concrete walls collapsed inward as cooking equipment, ventilation systems, and processing machinery were pulverized into twisted metal. Years of construction and millions of dollars in specialized equipment became rubble in seconds. Guard towers toppled as precision strikes eliminated defensive positions. The barracks housing security personnel took direct hits, ending any organized resistance before it could begin. Generator buildings exploded, cutting power to surveillance systems and communications equipment throughout the facility. The strikes lasted exactly 2 seconds. 24 weapons found their targets with surgical accuracy. When the explosions ended, nothing remained of the billion-dollar operation except smoking craters and scattered debris. The jungle fell silent except for crackling flames consuming what little survived the bombing. Cartel radio networks erupted in panic. Encrypted communications revealed terror among surviving commanders who witnessed the destruction from distant observation posts. "They know where we are," became the whispered message spreading through criminal networks across multiple states. Laboratory workers abandoned their posts at other facilities. Supply convoys scattered into mountain hideouts. Mexican radar operators detected the strike formation only after bombs began exploding. Air defense systems were activated too late to intercept aircraft already climbing toward American airspace. Ground controllers tracked 12 fast-moving contacts departing Mexican territory, but could not identify the aircraft type or origin. President Sheinbaum received the emergency briefing at her residence 30 minutes after the attack. Intelligence officials confirmed American military aircraft had conducted unauthorized strikes on Mexican soil. The operation violated national sovereignty and international law. Mexico's foreign ministry immediately summoned the American ambassador for emergency consultations. The Pentagon released no official statement. A Defense Department spokesman refused to confirm or deny military operations. The White House press secretary declined to comment on classified national security matters. America's response was silence that spoke louder than any diplomatic protest. Within hours, the psychological impact spread through cartel organizations like wildfire. Leaders who had operated with impunity for decades suddenly faced an enemy that could eliminate targets from invisible aircraft. Safe houses were abandoned overnight. Production facilities shut down operations. The untouchable kings of Mexico's underworld discovered they were no longer untouchable. The strike represented a fundamental shift in America's approach to the drug war. Criminal organizations that built empires, believing geography provided protection, now faced military technology designed for eliminating terrorist networks. 2 seconds of American air power had permanently changed the rules of engagement between nations and cartels. Thanks for watching. While you are still here, click on the link on your screen to check out another of our videos. See you there.